that matching
And
enough
it's
for you?
9 a.m. and we're live. And just like every week that we do this, completely underprepared and ready to shoot the shit from the hip. Good morning, Max. How are you?
It's great to be here. Yeah, actually, very good, Alicia. Very good. Yeah.
It struck me this morning that this is our last one of these that we've got booked in. And then I'm like, oh, am I not going to get to talk to you every week after this? That's bullshit.
Yeah. It's like something we've agreed to do can't be changed. That's hoisted by our own rule. I mean, we could do something about that. Couldn't we?
How useful is it? So one of the things I've been talking a lot about with my different groups and different clients this week is how powerful it is to just schedule things. You know, we go, oh, I'd like to go to the gym on Tuesday, or it would be nice to talk more to Max. And that just means nothing. But as soon as it's an appointment in your calendar, the gravity goes like this.
Yeah, and how quickly that can be the case once you've labeled, once you've tagged, that's a stream of this thing as a result. I mean, I remember you said, hey, let's talk again, and suddenly 4 are scheduled, and it's easy to do after that. And that linking of, vague thought with a very precise micro action is hugely powerful. I mean, all it took was click, 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 and the rest has come into place and wasn't harder than not doing it.
Or when you can hook into a bit of obligation and peer pressure, that's really helpful too. So last week I was on the road and I was like, oh man, do I have to do this thing this morning? And then I'm like, yes, I do. 1, because I've got somebody else that I don't want to let down. 2, because we've said that there's 4, and if we didn't have one in the middle, well, that would be horrific. And then 3, because there are people that actually watch and enjoy this. Hello to all of you who are watching and hopefully enjoying this. I'm like, well, I can't let other people down. That would be horrific.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking about the fact that you were there in your hotel room thinking, oh God, I've got to talk to Max.
I'm overstating it.
But, eventually I got over it. Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot this week about a whole bunch of stuff to do with that, which is
we've all got good intentions.
We've all got good intentions. We've all got goals. We've all got dreams for our future, whether that's at work or whether that's personally. But that's not really enough, is it?
No, I was just reading, how much new habits just die easily. I was writing about it and how old habits die so hard. And so the wish-want thing and knowing the difference between wishing something and wanting it, and then wanting enough to actually, it's columns, wishes, wants, and then moving it into the want column and saying, what can I do about this? It's no good just changing the color of your Facebook page to a French flag when there's a terrible thing in France, and turning it to black because a terrible thing has happened in the USA. These are all good sentiments, but how do you turn it into action? Or all of these sentiments that we have, I think our brains are pretty good at warning us that something is important, and then also quite good at suppressing the urge to do something about it because it seems, kind of vague and scary. So we do a little thing that doesn't really lead to anywhere, like your diet. We boast to somebody that we're going to lose weight. We buy the stuff on eBay, but that's not the hard thing. The hard thing is to make it easy every day. And that goes for the big things too, I think.
I think so too. And I've been thinking about that a little bit, if we can contextualize that with relation to post-COVID life or transition from COVID life, where I've talked to a lot of people that talk a big game about things never being the same and new ways of working and working from home and all this kind of stuff. But as soon as, like your point, old habits die hard and new habits die easily, as soon as we've got a little tiny bit of normal life that comes back, we're all just reverting back to exactly how things were. Whether that's outside. So our social distancing, we're supposed to still be 1 metre apart, although hopefully come next Wednesday, we'll be at level 1 and that won't be the case anymore. And I think for the first 3 days, people were quite vigilant, and over time they've just reverted back to type because that's what we do, isn't it?
Yeah, there's one of my favorite papers of all time modeled how stress builds up. The original paper was about moving house. So a big thing in people's lives. But so you think about moving house because you need a bigger garden. That's the thing at the moment in the UK. The two things that are happening are more rentals because people are falling out with their partners, and people are buying houses with bigger gardens because they're anticipating having to stay in for the rest of all time.
Because they'd like a woodland, like some of your politicians.
They would like, and so, the pressure builds up. You say, hey, it would be nice to move to a new house, and it builds up, and then but then it goes a little bit lower because you maybe buy some new throw cushions or something and you get distracted. And so the pressure over time is always there that you'd like to move house, but never high enough for not long enough for you to do anything about it. And that thing happens in life. At the moment, something is really important, so people are talking about it, even though if it doesn't affect them personally, they're talking about it. And then over time, that will diminish potentially, and nothing will have been done about it, even though there'll be a report written that says it will never happen again. Yeah.
Like, I try really hard to be a tolerant person, and it doesn't come naturally to me at all. I'm very intolerant by nature, and I work hard to be mildly empathetic, but I'm still on the low range. So I reckon the thing that I like the most about myself is that I don't do that. So I'm a huge fan of immediate action. So if I decide, and I did decide this week, if I decide that I'd like to move house, I'd like to buy another house, there is immediate action. And within, just like our scheduling our things, within an hour, I will have scheduled an appointment with a mortgage broker. I will have identified my top 5 properties on the real estate website. I will have booked an open home. I will have thought about my criteria. I will have changed what I'm doing at home because I know that I'm not going to stay here any longer now, and I've mentally left it. Like, immediate action is, I have a bias toward it, and nothing frustrates me more than working with other people who don't have that. So we talk about things we're going to do and they go, yes. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, how did that go? Oh, yes, we're still thinking about forming a working party, and then perhaps we'll be able to put a plan together. And I'm like, this could be done by now, mate. You're overcooking it. If you'd just done 4 things the day that we spoke about it before we left the meeting room, this would be half solved.
Completely, and it's a series of meetings that nobody wanted to hold, that nobody thinks are worthwhile, that leads nowhere, with everybody putting all the good stuff onto any other business, and let's take this offline and let's discuss that later, rather than saying, for instance, hey, I don't know about that, but let's use our phones. You notice that it's really weird thing that people ban mobile communications devices in meetings, but that's the one thing you need so that you stop.
Yeah, so you can book something and buy it and schedule it in. Done.
Instantly. So scheduling or information. I remember we were in a meeting once, and before we started in the morning, big logistics firm, and we were looking at how we could do this better. And rather than scheduling things, we were on the phone and using the internet to get the suppliers in India, as it happened, into the room, because they were the world experts in this particular thing. And we had them up on video screen, and we were asking them, and we were getting initial contracts all the way through the day, so that by the end of the day, we actually had a prototype up and running. You can move that fast.
I like that. And government, they've tried to do a bit of that with meetings, and they've gone as far as they make it someone's job to write a list of actions and then bug people about it until the next meeting. So one person goes or scurries away and writes their list of the things that everyone has to do, and then sends little emails. Here's the action list, little passive-aggressive emails. I'm a big fan of the idea that you don't leave a meeting with a job. So if you've said you're going to send an email or make a phone call or book a thing in or buy something or whatever you're going to do, why don't you just do it right now? And then if it's wrong, adjust it next week.
When you were talking about that, I was thinking, apart from enjoying your prop, by the way, I totally
which was
that.
A branded pen, I'll point out, because why would you use a pen that didn't have your name on it? If stationery's not for narcissism, what's it for?
Do you remember those pencils? I used to love getting those, the pencils with your name on it, from in gold lettering from your grandfather. I loved that stuff. In fact, I loved all the presents that you got. My grandfather lived in New York, so he'd send us all the sort of stuff from Sesame Street and special jeans that were only sold in America with double knees so that you wouldn't wear them out, in multiple colors. So that was me in the 70s with sort of red and green jeans running around North London. But
I think we're a bit more rustic in New Zealand. We'd just take a knife to the side of a pencil and just scrape a piece out of it and then try and write our name in it with a Vivid or another pen. Anyway, we've become distracted by stationery. I could do that all day. I love stationery.
But what you were describing there, we were starting to describe, was how things are ordinarily, as opposed to how things are when we make progress.
Yeah.
So we have meetings that are scheduled for no particular reason, a kind of mindless meeting rather than a meeting of minds. Then we divide
a mindless meeting instead of a meeting of mind. Gosh, you're gold. You just drip gold out of your mouth. I love it.
It's like, I was just about spit and everything, but it's gold. So a kind of reverse Midas, a Midas spatterer. But also you were describing cutting the thing into bits. So people treat life, they say life's complex, so let's chop it up into bits and give this person this job and this person this job and this person this job, and then be surprised that it doesn't fit back together again. You know, rather than saying this is everybody's job, this is where we'd like to get to, and we'd like you to kind of focus on this bit, but it's all our jobs. And the difference is quite huge. And when you get into cultures who want things done, they do things like ban PowerPoint. Of course they do. And they have, you know, whiteboards on the wall.
People still use PowerPoints, Mac. Who's still using PowerPoints?
People do.
Nobody I want to be friends with.
Nobody. But people do that stuff. I mean, clearly in your meetings they don't, but cutting those things up into bits rather than leaving them together, you know, another mistake. And I think, I mean, totally on my mind this week, of course, it is the merger in the States and everything that's come from it, much more than, to fit in my head, much more than COVID. That's just, you know, something that we have to live with. But this idea of something that is an old problem that has not been solved, and that to me is, you know, if you're Black, that wherever you are in the world, that's quite haunting. That's horror. That's ghosts. That's, you know, that's my father you're thinking of. That could have been me. This has happened before. Why has that never happened before? And you're thinking of your friend and all of those things. And I tell you, there are some people who are, if you want a little bit of a clue what that's like, you just imagine sticking up for somebody in a meeting when racism or prejudice is shown, and the worry that will stick somehow and that you don't want to make a fuss. And James Corden did, you know, just a terrific piece to camera, and he said, look, why does anyone want to hear from me? Well, I'll tell you why in this case, because we caused the problem, and how can we expect Black people to solve a problem that white society causes? And the instant that I was looking at some stats, I know I've pulled to that, but that's the big problem that's in my head. I'm thinking, but this is this big thing that I want solved and a lot of people want solved, but it's not getting solved. So how have we made progress in the past? And how can we make progress in the future? And they're just looking at some stats saying that 72% of Black Americans believe that white Americans don't understand what it's like. And the first comment I saw on this big poll, and the first comment I saw on this poll was somebody who said, I think that's crazy. I've talked to all my friends and they say that they totally understand. I mean, WTF, like, just, you know, so what actionable thing are you going to do? And you can use this as an example for everything, but to me, it's like Kafka or Catch-22, where, for those who don't know, Kafka's most famous story is Metamorphosis, but the one that I love is the castle, the tower, and this whole idea that a man comes into a village and nobody expects him, and he gets into this whole crazy system and ends up being killed at the end of it, and nobody knows why. It just keeps happening. And I think that all of our jobs is to look around and say, what can we improve and why isn't it improving, rather than just looking for the shallow.
So I reckon there's a couple of things in that, isn't there? And one of them is that what makes a problem like embedded institutionalized racism so challenging is that it is tenacious and embedded and soaked into all of the behaviors and processes and ideas that underpin not just a police force, but a whole society, right? So that is big and complex and mixed up and just hard to get your head around. And so the first step is acknowledging that systemic, deeply tenacious, embedded element of it. But then I think the problem with acknowledging that is that it then feels too big, right? And so what I like about what you're saying there is that on the one hand, yeah, there's something in here where the bias and the culture and the norms are so powerful that it overrides individual judgment, which is how I think about what happens in the case of the police, who are all, in theory, well-motivated, good people doing awful, awful shit, because that's how the system works. But then on the other hand, when we think about those kind of systemic issues like that, it all feels a bit much for us. And so we go as far as, oh, I think I get it, or I'm going to put a profile filter over my profile picture on Facebook. And I think what people want is that bias to action and go, hey, here are 5 really practical right now actions that you can take that the collective impact of which would be really meaningful to starting to shift the dial in our community and in the society. And when I think about that, so we had in March last year, a horrific incident in Christchurch in the South Island of New Zealand, where we had a gunman enter 2 mosques in Christchurch and open fire and shoot a whole bunch of worshippers. And it was awful. And it brought to light some really serious, deeply embedded, institutionalized racism in New Zealand that we don't like to acknowledge. And that was really uncomfortable as a conversation for our country. But the thing, what I liked best about the communication that came out of that was an article that came from my favorite independent New Zealand news source, The Spin-Off, that just had a list of 10 things that you could do, 10 practical, meaningful things that you could do that weren't putting up social media posts in solidarity, but were like, go to your local mosque, take them a meal and some flowers, give them a hug, have a conversation. Here's a charity that you can donate to that would be useful support. Here are 5 things that you can talk to your children about to change the way they think before they get sucked in. Here, it was just this really practical list. And I was like, oh, that's what we need. Because if we can wrap our heads around systemic unconscious bias, it feels a bit big, doesn't it?
It does feel big. And of course, not everybody is the same. I mean, these are all the thoughts that come to people's minds. I mean, to have an acronym MAD, that people either they minimize something that's coming or that's bad, they attack the messenger, or they deny that it's even a problem. And that's not everybody. Not everybody does that. But where the problem comes is where they do one of those 3 things instead of recognizing it and seeking to understand it and then doing something that is necessary about it, moving into that run loop stuff. And you're so right that you need something actionable. But the first micro action that you can take is find out the shit that you don't know about anything, really. 30 seconds of research, right? What don't I know? If you don't know it, find out about it, and then things move much faster.
The individual action, the movement to individual action requires a sense of individual agency. And with things like embedded racism or systemic issues, individual agency requires individual acknowledgement, and that's really hard because it feels blamey. So I've got a comment in the comments here that it's really hard for people to accept that they have unconscious bias or additional privilege, not because of anything they did wrong, but because that's just there. And so we have to step along that journey of being able to say, oh, I understand this. There is some individual agency or responsibility or ownership that I have to take. Even if I think of myself as a good person who's done nothing wrong, I need to acknowledge that actually I'm part of something that is wrong. So then what are the individual actions I can take because I have a responsibility to do it? And it's easy for one of the links in that chain to get broken because ownership can feel a lot like blame.
Yeah, well, especially if you might feel that ownership is being put onto you. and therefore you've got to feel bad. I mean, I know that we have slightly different views that have come out maybe about, like, I like to love people. I like to think the best of them. But I know that there's a range of human behaviors, you know, from truly psychopathic all the way through to truly angelic, you know, really looking out for everybody, even at the cost of their own life or the cost of their own happiness. We have all the way to angelic altruism to psychopathic bastard. But most people are somewhere in between, and it's the system. You know, human systems have human natures because they're us. And I think taking an action that says, hey, what can I do to understand any problem that is in the way, anything at all?
I've been thinking about, so we've had our share of, well, hasn't everyone, but we've had our share of disasters and shocks and interesting times in New Zealand over the past few years. And I've been working with a leadership team where there are 3 different experts working with the team at the same time. So I'm doing strategic leadership stuff, and this guy's doing like resilience, mental health stuff. And he was saying, yeah, what's really interesting about this compared to some of the other disasters that we've been through, if we think about COVID compared to, say, the Christchurch earthquakes, poor Christchurch, it's had a rough time. 8 years ago, we had the huge earthquakes in Christchurch, and he said, in the earthquakes, there was 6 months after the event where we had basically no suicide or mental health issues in Christchurch, and then we got a huge bow wave afterwards. But we had this 6-month gap, and in that time, people were extremely busy taking groceries to their neighbours, shoveling liquefaction out of the streets, repairing their homes, engaging with their community. Then we got the mental health stuff. With the pandemic, because we've had no agency at all, like the most useful thing we can do for our community has been to stay home by ourselves, and the best action has been inaction, the mental health impact has been immediate. So within a week of lockdown, we saw helpline calls increasing, we saw domestic violence increasing, we saw depressive episodes increasing. And that lack of agency and ability to take any action, I think, is really problematic, because I think we're made for it. We're driven toward it. Our brains want it and need it. And if we can't grab it, we fall to bits.
Yeah, well, we need action, we need social interaction, both of those things. There's something that you said earlier that I want to link back to. You talked about your desire to do the next thing, to make it all happen once you've reached a decision.
Now, yesterday, an hour ago.
Yep.
Yes.
So that in the psychological terms describes a locomotive. It's a locomotive mindset, or that desire to just push forward as early as possible. So you do something even if it was inefficient, because you just want to move forward by abstraction. And then
sometimes
so somebody can be high on locomotion or low on locomotion, and they can also be high on assessment, the ability to see options and alternatives, or low on assessment. And so you can imagine that if you're really low on assessment and high on locomotion, you're kind of dysfunctionally impulsive. You're just running around crazily doing stuff, but it doesn't really amount to anything. It could even be crime. You just kind of do what's in your head. And if you've got a boss who's like,
I love a bit of crime.
They tell you just to get on with it. You mean there's going to be a problem? I mean, our test and tracing app in the UK doesn't work with any other European test and trace app.
Well, some of these
and I could just imagine that conversation. Hey, listen, Prime Minister, it's important that there's interoperability. And he goes, well, just get it done. Just get it done.
Get on with it.
Bangs his fist. And the same is true for all this other kind of stuff. If somebody's uncomfortable, they move straight to action, but not positive action. Just get it out of my way action. So what you really got to get is people who are high on looking at alternatives and high on action. And that's that perfect hotspot of now energy, the kind of stuff you're describing and personifying.
And so a lot of my work's with government, and so I deal with a lot of policy analysts and technical experts and people who've made a career from being detail focused and accurate and clever. And I think using your locomotion assessment matrix, I work with a lot of people who are very high on assessment, and it's almost because of that they seem to be quite low on locomotion, because they get that paralysis by analysis where they can see all of the options, and it just seems like, well, we're going to have to spend an extra 6 months crunching through these because it goes much deeper than we ever imagined. And you go, well, the moment's past, mate. It's too late now.
Yeah, and sometimes they think that's because they're doing a good detailed thing, but actually they're just not very action oriented. That's the problem. So what they're doing is patting themselves on the back, saying, well, look, the reason is because I'm really a detailed person. Don't push me. Rather than accepting that you can do both. It's just too easy to say, look, well, clearly I don't want there to be any errors. And really, that person's not thinking. They're just saying. And you have a lot of just saying.
But if we link that back to our conversation around systemic issues and the kind of behaviours and norms that creates, or the difference between working in a place that works in a meeting and working in a place that has meetings about meetings, I think it's really easy for people to write that off as this is just me. I'm just very detail oriented, or I'm just very action oriented, or I'm this or I'm that. And I call bullshit on that, because I think actually you might have an inclination a particular way, sure, but more likely is that you've been rewarded for a particular style of behavior throughout your career, probably for a good reason, over a long period of time. And the accumulation of that experience and reward has developed your current style. So if you need to readjust the balance a little bit, you can just do that. And if you want to create a workplace, or you want to create a community or a team of people that do lean toward the other way. So if you are a bit impulsive, if you're a young startup and you're a bit impulsive and you want to get a little bit more cautious, you can build that in. You can change those behaviors. And the same way that if you are an environment of inertia, you can change the practices.
Yes, I mean, to me, as soon as you learn that there's a range and that there's a benefit of both, for instance.
Yes.
That as soon as you see the range, I found people can first self-identify, but not view that as a label, not a fixed thing. I mean, I hate all those letters that people do to decide where they are.
Yes, but I'm an HYPJ owl, so this is just how I'm wired. I've got a very blue aura.
Have you ever seen those on dating sites as well? You get those on Tinder. Really? But that's because it's astrology. Yes. It's saying I'm Libra and I'm this combination of letters. Somebody says that's what I am, rather than this is a sort of a pattern of behavior that I tend towards. And then you can say, what else can I get? And the reason that I really care about this bothness is that that's where the progress comes from. And we know that change is inevitable, but the progress is the valuable bit, and it's not. It isn't, and that's what we're trying to do, I think. Seek some progress.
Your use of the word bothness, and I'm going to use that more than 3 times today. I think we could have a bit of bothness in here. I think we could definitely have a bit of bothness. I've got a full day offsite today, not for somebody else, but for my team. We're going to have a strategy day. Isn't that ridiculous? Because we don't do that. Like, we do that as a job for everybody else, but we don't do that. That would be ridiculous. We're doing it for ourselves today for the first time. A full day offsite.
Yeah, it's very impressive, really, to use your own expertise.
What's your advice on how I get the most out of my strategy day today, Max?
Well, my advice to anybody is I mean, you'll know that my view of strategy is simple, but simple is complex, right? So I think it's worth sort of underlying. So I'm a curious person who likes to understand how the world works. And one of the reasons for that is I like to shift it. I want it to be a better world, just like shifting your furniture or whatever in a garden. I want to understand so I can remake.
You got furniture in the garden?
Yeah. Have you not got furniture in your garden? Yeah. And I have plants in my house. That's another thing that we do here. God's sakes. You mean you can do both? He's probably a really fun guy to go out with. Imagine the things you can teach me. You mean there's not just one way of doing everything?
Hold on. This is
Dig
too
me?
much. This is too
You've
much.
been fooling me. Yeah, but bothness is better. So it's advice, I guess. So from the psychology, that's curiosity. The PhD thing, that's curiosity. I want to understand. So if I'm reading Catch 22 or Kafka, it's to understand the human nature and then to simplify so that you can better look at it, thinking like a physicist. So what my advice to any group, get the
I was about to say,
canvas
I've
up
only
on the
got
wall.
6 hours for the lunch break, Max. We're going to have to, like, I've got my 6 hour offsite with a lunch break in the middle. I don't know how curious I'm going to be able to be today. I'm going to need some action steps.
I think you know perfectly well what to do in your own strategy away day. But what I'd suggest to anybody is get the canvas up. That's what it was designed for. You don't have to buy it. Just download it for free. Get that up, because the advantage is to say, keep asking the 5 questions that you have. Where are we? Where are we going? How do we get there? How do we measure it? What do we need to do? These 5 questions. What was driving us? What's stopping us? And if you have that, and we have huge versions that, that right up on the wall, so that everybody can see the thinking. So it's not squeezed down into a document or just in Alicia's head even. People can see it and then keep that as a version. Yeah, I'm
so
sure
my
it
mission
is, but
today,
it's not really.
One of my key strategy drivers today, which, I mean, part of it's strategy, but actually we've done a lot of that work and a lot of it's more operating model than anything else, is how much can I now not do? So my goal today is to come out of this meeting with much less to do, because everybody else has either systemized it or taken it away or are doing it for me. So I'm like, how much can I leave at 4 o'clock today without having anything to do? I'd like less to do. And the more that I come, the freer I come out of that meeting with, as opposed to, because usually you come out of these days and you've got 25 different things to do, as we've talked about. Oh, I've got to get a new supplier and I've got to start a new thing and buy new software and learn a new thing. And I want to leave with less on my plate than I walk in with. That's my goal today.
Yeah, and so there's a goal for the strategy, in effect, to have less.
Take everything off Alicia's plate. She's tired.
Get rid. Yeah. So I guess that would be to both increase focus, the resources on what you want to accomplish. So we say we're not backing all the horses. We can do that, and then also so that you have more slack to discover new things that would be really useful to do. And there's a lot in there, about slack.
We try and have a 20% margin rule, because every time we try and use all my time up, because I've got quite limited time, because I've got, half custody of my children, and I've got a whole situation where I'm like, right, the time that I've got needs to be used extremely, extremely well. But if we use all my time, if we book me in my delivery days for more than a few weeks at a time, I have this oppositional issue where I start rebelling and I come up with new ideas that I then start very late at night implementing. And so I need to leave enough margin for me to do stuff I didn't see coming. Otherwise, I'm gonna do that at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's not good for anyone.
No, not at all, especially if you are the thing that is sold as part of your business. It's an Alicia business run by Alicia, but Alicia is sold. You are the product, aren't you? And the owner of your business.
Am I the product? I might be. All right. Well, how good was this? As always, I feel like we're getting better and better at these, and I'm a bit nervous that they're ending and that I might miss you, and that like everybody in LinkedIn's going to miss us. And I think we have to have a conversation about this.
We might have to. So is this the end of this one?
I think it is. I'm going to click it. I'm kind of going to click it.
Let me just say to. Did we cut? Okay, that's it. So what did we miss?
I don't know. Like, I get a bit rambly, but I feel like that was quite focused for a rambly Thursday morning. I think last week was much ramblier because we tried to do, just politics, religion, culture, society, companies, strategy, change, personal habits, all in one go. Whereas today we were mildly more focused. What do you reckon?
I thought there were 2 streams of today. I mean, one was that how do you do the thing that you've prompted to do? So you get a prompt from your brain, it tells you that this is important. You should prepare for X. You should lose this weight. You should get a new job. This relationship is over. Whatever the prompt is, you get a prompt, and your brain, has been whirring around the default mode.
It's like a little push notification with a little. You got to trust your brain, though, don't you? I mean, I think this is part of the problem is that people don't trust their brain. That something goes off that says, "Get out of this relationship, get out of this job, do this thing," and they go, "Really though? I don't know if I should listen to that." Whereas I trust my brain implicitly, which occasionally gets me into trouble. But if my brain goes off and says, "Get out of here," or "Enter this," or "Pay for this thing," I go, "All right," and it happens. Because it's got a pretty good track record with my brain.
It's the listening to it, isn't it? I mean, it's the good intuition, bad intuition stuff. I mean, what I can tell you is that a pretty cool thing, all that right brain, left brain stuff is old. That's one thing I'd like anybody to know. I'll tell you, I mean, it's all old. If you hear somebody talking about right, left, I don't know. Maybe they don't know anything about it. It's kind of
bullshit, isn't it? Because I thought I didn't have a right brain for a while. I was like, no. Every time I try and write a book or do a thing, and I'm like, I need a story about this, and I can't find a story. And then I realized that I spend 80% of my in-person time spinning yarns and telling stories. So I'm like, that's clearly not true. There's just a thing in my brain that hasn't connected the activity of writing the stuff down to doing the yarns.
Because really we're just saying I'm analytic or I'm creative. I mean, so just say that. Don't say where it is in the brain, because it isn't in just one place in the brain.
There's an ad on TV. I don't think it's on anymore, but I don't know because I haven't had broadcast television for a number of years. But there was a really mildly culturally inappropriate ad for taco shells in New Zealand. And they're like, what are we going to do? We're going to have tortillas or we're going to have hard tacos? This is too hard. And this little girl goes, why not both? And that's what I keep thinking of today when you were talking about both.
Yeah, bothness.
Analytical and creative. Why not both?
But
very good.
I mean, I think bothness definitely. I think this idea, though, that human systems that emphasize, sometimes they're just failing completely. Sometimes they're surviving.
We don't talk about that enough. Sometimes we just suck.
Sometimes there's a human system that you find is surviving, because some people are succeeding in it, but most people aren't. And then some systems, most people are succeeding, but some people aren't. But what I'm always aiming for is
that's the tricky thing about this bloody institutionalized racism business, isn't it? It's like, oh yeah, I really want to break down this system that privileges me over everybody else. Yeah, right. You do realize if you do that, you're going to lose a bit of privilege. And I think that's oh shit. And you know how we had that chat last week about how, if you've been dominant for a long time, equality feels a little bit like oppression. I think it's a bit like that, which is we want systemic change but we don't want to lose anything. And so, I mean,
But don't you think that's the wrong
for Thursday morning? But it's this whole idea that, capitalism is really terrible for the environment and for vulnerable people. I wonder if we could apply more capitalism and fix this. And because
it's one of those zero-sum things. It's one of those zero-sum things where somebody believes maybe to give to if somebody has more, they have to have less, rather than understanding that everybody actually can have more, and that's human history. You think that we are better off or worse off than we were when there were only a million of us? We are better off. We live better lives when more of us are
we live longer. Our children don't die as often.
We lose nothing. We lose nothing.
Fewer communicable diseases. There's less war. We push all that to the side, don't we? We're like, things are bad. Things are really bad. My nana has a saying, actually, she often says to me when she's giving me the kind of summary on world events, which is always a bit of a laugh. Oh, it's getting bad, Alicia. It's getting bad. And it's delivered in exactly that tone of voice. And I'm always, what I want to do is what you just didn't go, actually, on most metrics, Nana, it's getting much better in terms of, poverty and health and conflict. But no, I see what you're saying. It feels like it's getting bad.
I mean, you have to ask so many questions to make any progress in life. There's that old quote about the unreasonable person makes progress. But it's not really the unreasonable person. It's just the person who relentlessly pursues better. And just keep saying why.
Actually gets good information. Like one of the best books I've read in the last year was Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Have you read that one?
Yeah, the one recommended by Gates.
It's so good. And it's like, yeah, look, I know everything feels a bit fucked, but the fact is, it's quite good. And I really like that. And
yeah, unless.
let me put it in a graph and show you that things are quite good. And you go, well, fuck, it's in a graph now. Hard to argue with that.
Yeah,
like
isn't that because you can have both again, though? You know,
that you and your bothness.
Yeah, but the intelligence is having more than one thought. And so
have you found your one word yet? In our offline chat last week, I remember saying, give me your one word. Give me your one big focus word. And you were like, fuck that. Multiplicity is my word. And I was just, you and your bothness. Have you settled on a big word, or are you sticking with multiplicity?
Well, I think that both is very similar. I don't believe in one thing. I think the world's
greedy.
More,
are we going with greedy?
I think I like a lot of things, Alicia. A lot of things, and I'm not giving up any of them. I'm going to have them all. You know, I'm the person who has 7 books by his bedside table stacked up and is carrying around his. I've got devices, but then I've got my. You know, you're going out and you dance through till 6, and then you go to your event, and then you listen to a book and you're listening to music at the same time. You know, I think lots.
Part of me likes that. Part of me's like, stop it, put it away, wipe the bedside table, calm down, make your bed, do one thing at a time, get your shit together. I just sort of oscillate between the two.
Yeah, but really you do a lot of stuff. And so, yeah, if there's a thing, it's move the important stuff from wishes to wants to actually making some action. And there's some important shit. I mean, I
give somebody else something to do.
Out of my head ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
Somebody else take it. Make it real. Here's my idea. Could you please look after it?
Nurture it, and look after it. Well, actually, that's another thing.
Water it. Feed it.
You can feed other people's. Well, for instance, if you know nothing about a good thing, but a thing you want to change, and you don't really know how to change it, then support somebody. You know, go out and find somebody who knows more about it than you do.
Somebody else is doing some good stuff. Ask them. I like that. All right. I suppose I should go and do strategy day.
Yeah. I think you should enjoy that strategy day. Enjoy.
I'm going to. Nothing makes me more excited than strategy day. And it's just struck me now, because I know that every time we have this yarn, we're like, shit, we've never aligned this in a way that we can share a drink. And now I'm like, strategy day is the perfect day, actually, to kick off with a beer at 9 o'clock in the morning. And we could have done that.
You have it? Yeah, we could have. We might have to talk again.
Fine. That's what you want. Right. I will get drunk with you over the internet. If you insist.
If you insist.
Fine. All right.
Snap.
Have a good week.
All right. Bye.
Bye.